Okay, are we all seeing the camp meeting Guadalupe, Diodochi Wars 3 of 15?
Yep, see it.
You got it. Yep.
So if I X out of the slides, then it'll be the big screen that comes up, right?
Where you go is up to the top left. See where it says slideshow? Up a little higher.
Right.
Yeah, slideshow. Click on
Slide,
that.
yeah. Okay.
It's either slow or it didn't do what it needs to. Click it again.
No.
Or is it this?
Or is it this slide right here?
No, we're up there. Oh, my mouse is there. Sorry. It's a slideshow up at the top. Sorry. In that where it says home insert. Yeah, that one. Sorry.
Yeah, I got it.
I have
Okay.
my mouse in the way. I did that the other day when we were talking too.
Okay.
And now go to the left. Whoops. Click it again. It went away.
Mm-hmm.
Click it again. Okay, on the left-hand side where it says from beginning.
Got it.
Right there. You know how to do it from here? You just, every mouse click will bring it up to the screen.
My mouse click. Okay.
That looks great.
I am glad it's working.
Looks
Okay.
great. Good screen. Full
Good evening, everyone. So, as I was telling Val, you know, when this came up, April of 2019, and you've probably heard us say this before, and it was when we, at least myself, is the first time I've even heard of Jeff Pippinger and the movement. And so when this was happening or showing, we didn't even know about the camp meetings, how to go about it. And I know Elaine and everyone there at SAC Fellowship were just so gracious and, you know, kind of moving us along. But at the time I was kind of standing still and not really knowing, you know, to move forward. And so even though I heard this maybe once, maybe twice, maybe thrice, it's really only now it's sinking a little bit deeper. And, you know, in God's mercy and grace, you know, he's just allowed us to sometimes meander and then, you know, go back again. So, you know, I want to thank Elaine and, you know, for doing this and then allowing, you know, being available and everyone else who's presented it in their own ways. And again, we're representing it and kind of seeing it in a different light again and what's the word, just really internalizing it. So this is the third presentation. So we'll go ahead and begin. We've been studying Acts 27 in two parts, the two ships, and then we've taken those two parts, perhaps without realizing it. We've studied this chapter as if it was a parable, because it is a parable. We've compared these two lines on two journeys or two ships, and we saw that they represented the same thing, the institutions or structures of the United States and Adventism. One gives us an ugly picture of a bad ship that's in a bad condition and it's dead. It has the opportunity to come alive in 1989 and it chooses to abide in its current condition. It takes us from that time through the midnight cry or Panion. And then we see that it's overturned progressively, leading up to its close of probation, which we would normally refer to as Sunday law. We mark that apostasy, but it's the end of the sixth head, the end of the institutions of the United States as we know them. So again, we've got the two ships, the Beneventum, which means abide in death, and then we've got the Alexandria, which is protector, defender of the people. And it's just so amazing how names tell it all, you know, and it, like with Elder Tess always says, God doesn't waste words or waste space. So every word, every name, every number has significance.
Then we come to our second line. We see these same institutions have protected and defended God's people from 1798. We want to understand what that protection and defense looks like and what the United States was meant to be. Was that protection and defense just for God's people, or was that liberty extended to everyone? Because we're saying it started in 1798, and at the same time, we see the rising up of Adventism with William Miller. It goes through 1844, and it loses its way in the middle of the Civil War in 1863, and then goes off course and never gets back.
Whoops, what happened? Okay. We back?
I think that's it, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, and goes off course and never gets back to its original plan. We spent a lot of time in this movement, rightly so, going back and understanding what Adventism was meant to be. In our later classes, we'll go back and consider what the United States was meant to be. Perhaps we can have a little bit more clarity in understanding at least what it was not meant to be.
It comes to 1989, and it's the story of the wise. The parable of 10 virgins begins to be repeated. Paul tells them that they're in danger if they go on the course that they want to take. His warnings were ignored in Caesarea. They were ignored in Lycia. They set sail anyway. There's a favorable south wind, but the south wind blows before the east wind. So it should have been a warning. We trace in that history the king of the south. Was that wind good or bad for the ship? It was favorable. It was a wind that they wanted to have to go on the course that they wanted to pursue. So for the United States and Adventism, they're happy about this fall of the king of the south. But if the king of the south is going to cease from restraining them, you know that the east wind is going to come, and that is another restraint. The south wind precedes the east wind. The east wind, or known as Euroclydon, it struck the boat, and we mark that as 9/11. The boards begin to pull apart, and the boat is flooding. They do this work to tie the boat back together again, and we describe that as a wrapping of the rope after rope around the boat. And we usually represented that as a line upon a line. Ellen White tells us the reason the boat is safe is because Paul is on board. God had promised to preserve his life because he has a job function. If he was to die in this history, he would not fulfill his job function, so the boat must be preserved.
We come to a point in time, Paul is given a message. A warning begins for the boat. You're going to be shipwrecked. Then on the 14th night at midnight, they can see it visibly ahead. Now they have time connected. They sounded some distance fathoms. So they have some concept of how far away they are. They at least know it's close. We mark that as midnight and the midnight cry. We mark Acts 27:27 as the midnight cry because we're given repeated allusions to Millerite history. We can tie that to Cyprus. We can see midnight, the cry that would have gone up over the boat, the 14th night of the Exeter camp meeting, and a weaker logic, but often connected, 27:27, a doubling. It's here in this history after that cry, Ellen White notes that Paul is the master of the ship, You see his presence before, but it now has visibility. This all adds up to shipwreck, which is the Sunday law.
And here they go to the third group. All those on board the boat, Adventism or cleansed, so that by Sunday law you have a solid group, purified, united, that are ready to give a message to the island. And we know that there's some on that boat who did not accept Paul's message. So shipwreck is Sunday law. The last thing we discuss is that Panium is the midnight cry. What are they crying about? Is it for these groups of people, or is it that cry about the condition of the ship? We are saying that it is about the ship, the institutions and the structures. The cry is not for people, it's for the ship itself. There is a cry before shipwreck, which is a midnight cry, and then the close of probation or the shut door.
The last detail in this chapter, what connects us to our next subject, is to consider this second group of people. We have Paul, Aristarchus, and Luke. What does Aristarchus mean? It means the chief prince. Ellen White says in her writings that he had accompanied Paul as an active choice. He was not tied to this ship. He did not have to be there, but he made a choice that he wanted to go on this journey so he could act as a support and encouragement to Paul. Who is this chief prince who goes on this journey as an act of choice? Christ. What about Luke? What does his name mean? Light giver or light bearer. So he illuminates. But does he speak of himself? We deduce in verse 2 that he is there. He speaks of us, but he doesn't describe or speak of himself. He's not there to give his own story, but he is giving the history, and that is the work of the Holy Spirit. So when we talk about the first group, we see Paul. He's the one speaking, giving the message at Caesarea, Lycia, and at the midnight cry. But he is accompanied by Aristarchus and Luke. They are there as a choice, and they're there to give a message to the ship. Acts 27.
27, okay.
37.
Acts 27:37. We were in all in the ship 260 souls. This is a history between the midnight cry and shipwreck. It is at this point that Luke chooses to tell us how many people are on board the ship. Paul has been on it since 1844 at Myra. So he went through all this history. It's not until this point in the chapter that what appears to be completely random, that we are given the number of those on board. And Luke says, by the way, there's 276 people on board. But we are talking here about our second group in a time period between Panium and Sunday law. What group is a subject between Panium and Sunday law? Levites, because this is their harvest. This is the subject, Levites, and he says in this history between Panium and Sunday law, in the middle of it, he's choosing to tell us how many people. So if there's 276 people, how many of those are going to represent the Levites? Because this includes both groups, it includes the first and second, but it is in the time period of the harvest of the Levites. So we need to take the 276 and minus out Paul, Aristarchus, and Luke. And how many does that leave for the second group? There's 3, Paul, Aristarchus, and Luke, and the second group is 273. Those are the people in this history deciding whether they accept the message of Paul or reject it.
when we come to inspiration, one thing we see more and more of is that there is no information wasted. God uses a small amount of space to tell us all that we need to know about what he wants from us, to reveal himself, to explain the external events, because we can only take in so much information. So when we come to inspiration, is any of those details wasted? Any of that space? What we see more and more is that none of it is wasted. And it has importance for us. We take the number 276. It's teaching us of two groups within Adventism. There's three priests, and we have already identified them, cut them out, and that leaves us with 273 Levites.
Numbers 3:12. And I, behold, I have taken the Levites from among the children of Israel, instead of all the firstborn that openeth the matrix among the children of Israel. Therefore, the Levites shall be mine. Verse 13. Because all of the firstborn are mine, for on the day that I smote all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, I hallowed unto me all the firstborn in Israel, both man and beast. Mine shall be, I am the Lord. 14. And the Lord spake unto Moses in the wilderness of Sinai, saying, and verse 15, number the children of Levi, after the house of their fathers, by their families, every male from a month old and upward shalt thou number them. So here God is telling Moses that instead of the firstborn being chosen for the service of the sanctuary, he's choosing the tribe of Levi. So then if we follow through that chapter, it's going to give all the details of the numbering. The difficulty they're facing is to replace those firstborn. Every single firstborn must be replaced. The numbers need to match. You can't have a firstborn who's not replaced in the service of the sanctuary. They're going to number the Levites, and then they're going to number the firstborn. How many Levites do they have?
Numbers 3:39. All that were numbered of the Levites, which Moses and Aaron numbered at the commandment of the Lord, throughout their families, all the males from a month old and upward were 22,000. So they numbered the Levites, and it comes to 22,000. Numbers 3, chapter 3, verse 40. And the Lord said unto Moses, number all the firstborn of the males of the children of Israel from a month old and upward, and take the number of their names. Verse 42. And Moses numbered, as the Lord commanded him, all the firstborn among the children of Israel. Verse 43. And all the firstborn males by the number of names, from a month old and upward, of those that were numbered of them, were 22,213.
So there are 22,000 Levites. And how many firstborn? There were 22,273. So there's 273 too few Levites to fulfill the service of the sanctuary. When we go to Numbers 3, we are talking about their very beginning when they are first called. When we talk about Panium to Sunday law, we are talking about their very end when the Levites are called. They are called in the beginning and they are called at the end. When they are first called out, there's a problem because there's 273 too few to fulfill their job function. So what happens at the very end? 273 Levites are called in to fulfill their job function. The number is completed or made up. At the very beginning, there isn't enough, and they must be replaced man to man. At the very end, that situation is resolved, and the number becomes perfect. Where this number takes us is in some different way, is just in some way different. It's going to take us into a period of history of 273 BC. We're familiar with the numbers in the Bible now that they can take us into a period of history. We do that with Deuteronomy 18:18. We see that at 18:18 with William Miller. We're going to do that, but from another direction. We're going to look at 273 BC. What we're going to see is that 273 BC takes us to a period of history that is illustrating a time between Panium and Sunday law. In that same period of history. That was it.
So from here, Elder Tess is going to transition from Acts 27 to the Diodochi Wars, taking that number 273. So she took the number 273. We're here. What do I want to say? It has to do with the Levites. But she's going to take that same number and transition to 273 BC with the history of the Diodochi Wars and Pyrrhus. But before we go there, what I would really like to do, because for me, anyways, I learn more from discussions and telling stories, actually telling a parable. So thus far, we've just read what Elder Tess have spoken. We wrote it down, and then, it was written down, and then we just regurgitated what Elder Tess has already spoken. But I would like to, for us, because we have time, take maybe 15 minutes, and for us to really, as many as who want to, go through these lines, remembering Acts 27, part 1 and part 2, because all these lines, what's filled in these lines are also from Acts part 27, part 1 and part 2. So I would like to have, a discussion about some of the things, about these timelines and the things that are written on there, and to jog our memories and to see, what they mean and what these numbers and names actually represent. So as we speak them, it'll be more imprinted in our own minds. So I'm going to start off. I'm just going to ask a question, and I just want to go through the top line and the bottom line. I just want to go through the lines. So, Adramitium, what does that mean?
Abide in death.
Hello, can anybody hear me?
Yes. Yes. Abide in death. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah, so Adramitium, and like I said, I want to generate a conversation. So please jump in. So in the time of the end, the cut out, what does that mean? Cut out.
Like in Daniel 2, cut out of the mountain.
So cut out of the mountain. So who's being cut out of the mountain?
God's people.
Okay, God's people are being cut out of the mountain. So that's what Caesarea means, is to be cut out. Who can say a little bit about Felix and Festus? Who are they? What do they represent?
The U.S. and SDA.
USA.
So Felix and Festus represent USA.
Right.
Agrippa, who does he represent?
SDA.
SDA. So both of them they come up at the same time. So you got state and church and God's people. They come up at the same time. And so the ship of Adramyttium is telling its own story. But both of these are kind of happening at the same time, but from two different perspectives. So you got Felix Festus, USA. You got Agrippa, SDA. What generation was Agrippa?
First generation. Oh, sorry, fourth generation.
Yeah, fourth generation. Okay. And I think in previous studies, I think Elder Tess said this was fourth journey for Paul.
Yes.
Yeah, the
Where is
fourth.
that?
What was the last thing you said?
His fourth journey.
Paul's fourth journey. Where is that found? Because I read the Acts, and unless I missed it, I couldn't see it.
If you go to the maps, I know it's on there, the maps inside your Bible, it shows it on that for sure.
In the map? Okay, I don't have maps in my Bible.
But I don't know if it says that actually in the wording, in the words of the Bible. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean, I would like to know where it says that was Paul's fourth journey. I don't know if like I said, I read the Acts, and I could not find it unless it's in Ellen White's writings.
I'll do
I know
the search for it because I don't remember where it's at, but it is.
I know for sure that it's written on the maps. That's what.
Okay.
Actually, Christine, I do have my Remnant Study Bible in the back. It does say Paul's second and third missionary journeys, but then it has numberings, and then it does say 4
Where?
right here. Paul delivers his farewell in Acts 20. Paul sails to Ephesus. Okay, I'll have to look at that.
Yeah, so I need to find where that is, because you got multiples of 4 here. So Agrippa is the fourth generation, and did he accept Paul's message?
No.
No,
No. I mean, he's the fourth generation, a long line of evildoers. He's grandfather. His grandfather killed somebody.
grandfather killed the children of Bethlehem.
The children of Bethlehem. Okay, thank you. And then Herod the Antipas, which was, I think, his uncle, killed somebody.
He killed James. I think he killed the apostle James.
Apostle James. And then another Herod killed John the Baptist.
Right.
So Agrippa comes in a long line of murderers.
That was Antipas.
Antipas, yes.
He killed John the Baptist.
And yes. And what was Agrippa familiar with? Oh, so the question, why couldn't Paul tell Festus what he told Agrippa?
Agrippa had that history behind him.
Right.
Festus wouldn't have understood it, right?
Right.
Yeah, because Agrippa was a Jewish king.
Yeah.
So, and he was one of the triumvirates that was in the temple service who set up the high priest.
So he understood the history of the Jewish people.
Yes.
Yes. And this is why Paul, couldn't tell Festus what he told Agrippa. Right, so we got two fours there. Paul's fourth journey, which I have to try to find where that is. Agrippa, fourth generation. Sidon is also fourth generation. Fourth generation from whom?
Noah? Is that the one?
Yeah, Noah.
When
Si-
when it comes to Paul, I was pulling up my Bible. I think I have the same one as, I think Christine and I have the same one.
The mission.
Yeah, it doesn't say fourth. It just shows the first, second. I don't remember how it read it, but it just said the last one. It said his trip to Rome. So his trip to Rome, that's Acts 27. So when you look at them listed out, it said he had early journeys, and then the first missionary, the second one, the third one, and then his trip to Rome.
Okay. All right. So going back to Sidon, it says fourth. Sidon is fourth generation of Noah. And who does Sidon represent?
Is Sidon the one that's also the name Kittim?
Yeah.
I think that's Cyprus.
Okay. Yeah,
I
that's
think
right. Yeah, Cyprus, I think.
yeah, Cyprus is Kittim, which is also fourth generation of whom? Noah.
Right.
Yeah, so both Sidon and Cyprus are fourth generation from Noah. And so Sidon represents what country? Anybody remember? United States. Okay, so Sidon represents United States. So we got 4 fours here. We've got fourth journey, fourth Agrippa generation, fourth generation Sidon, fourth generation Kittim or Cyprus. Okay, so what does number 4 represent in the Bible?
It's the final generation.
It's the final generation. So this ship is going nowhere, except it's going to abide in death. So you got Cilicia, Pamphylia. Cilicia means what?
Overturn,
And Pamphylia.
nation made of every tribe,
And which countries does that represent?
the United States.
United States, again. So, at this point, that United States, as we know it, is going to decrease. The 6th head of the United States is decreasing, but the 7th head is increasing. But when we say USA is decreasing, what does it actually mean? Is it decreasing in power? Is the United States decreasing in power as a 6th head?
I would think so.
Definitely decreasing in respect around the world.
Yeah. No, actually, they are increasing in power. What they're, if I understand Elder Tess correctly, what they're decreasing is what they were meant to be as United States of America. They're decreasing, they're increasing as the dragon, so they're becoming more powerful, more dictator-like, more powerful, but they're decreasing in their lamb-like beast. So their liberty, their freedom, all that is gone or going away, and their dictatorship, the rising in power, taking of the power, that's what's increasing. So they'll have a, I don't know if it's premier, but they'll definitely be like the head of the UN as one of the states.
Be like France was.
Yes.
Beginning of the kings of Europe, it'll be like France was. The premier
Right.
of the divisions of Rome,
Yes,
divisions of Europe, sorry.
of Europe. Yeah. So now they come to the end, the shut door, which is Myra. Myra means bitterness. And Lycia means harvest. So that's the closed door. Okay? You got Sunday law. So the journey of Adramitium, that's where it ends. It began in death, and you know, and it stayed in death. So you take the other ship, and you have two stories being told at the same time. So but in a different perspective. So you have now the ship of Alexandria. So Paul gets off in Myra, off of Adramitium, and now he embarks on another ship called Alexandria. So remember, this is happening at the same time. So Alexandria means what?
The protector or defender of the people. He doesn't get on the ship until way later. He's not on the ship at the beginning of its journey. This is the journey of that ship, but he's not on.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yes, because he gets off at Myra, at Adramitium, but then that's where he gets on in Alexandria. So it's a protector. And what is Alexandria carrying?
Wheat.
Wheat. Right. And so the protector of the people. What two institutions were supposed to protect the people?
The two institutions, the lamb-like horns.
Right. So you got
republicanism.
Yeah. So you got United States and Adventism. They grow up at the same time. They grew up at the same time, and they're both supposed to protect people. So as you journey along, you come to 61, our history. So it can parallel to our history. So you go to from Myra, you go to Cnidus. And I don't know what Cnidus means. Anybody have an idea what Cnidus means?
I think it meant fleshy.
Fleshy?
If I remember correctly.
Okay. So fleshy. So 1863, that corresponds to our time. That's when Alexandria, which represents both Adventism and United States, goes off course. Okay. And it also happens to be the midpoint of our Civil War, which was between 61 and 65. So Alexandria goes off course and Cnidus. Does it ever recover?
No.
No, it never recovers. So it continues to sail, and you go to Crete or Salmon. And then you stop at, and you come to Lycia, which means wise. And that corresponds to our time of the end, which is 1989. So you take the 126, which you get from 2520, and you begin then the midpoint of 1863. We come to, it gives us 1989, which is our time of the end. So Lycia means wise. Who are the wise ones?
The priests.
The priests. So we are raised up in 1989. So Alexandria keeps floating along, but then it hits us. The south wind blows, and what happens when the south wind blows? What happens after that?
Wind follows.
What's
The east.
I'm sorry?
The east wind.
The east wind follows, yes. So in our history, what country represents the south wind?
King of the South.
King of the South, which is
Oh, Russia.
Russia. Okay. And so we should have known that when that was happening in 91, when the Soviet Union was dismantling, that history, right? We should have known that east wind was going to strike, but we were caught unaware. So Euroclydon, the east wind strikes. What happens to the ship?
It starts to break apart.
Breaks apart. And so what did the people on the boat have to do to continue to keep it floating?
Ropes around
The undergirding.
The undergirding, tying the ropes around the ship, line up, which represents
line upon line.
line upon line. So even though we know that Adventism in the line of Adramitium is going to die, who keeps the ship afloat? Who keeps the institution afloat?
Ask that again.
Who keeps the institution afloat with a line upon line?
What are you talking about for us? I think
Right.
Okay, for us.
The two,
Yes.
So the
It's
movement.
movement.
Yes. So the movement keeps the institution afloat, because we know the institution of Adventism abide in death and will die, but the movement with the line upon line parable teaching is the one who is keeping it afloat, because we still have work to do. So as we float along, because and at this point, who's the master of the ship? Even though, well, that's wait a minute, that's a little later. Yeah. So Paul is now being respected because he says, "No, sir, you should have listened to me." But and so he gives a discourse to the centurion. So Paul is now being recognized. So we keep floating along, and then we come to our history, and we come to Raphia, Panium for us, which is this year, and the 14th night. It's the midnight, 14th night, and as Elder Tess says, probably, even though the Bible doesn't say, even though in Acts it doesn't say it, there's a cry that goes out because they spot what? What do they spot?
Land.
They spot land. So most likely they're going to cry out land. And so in the meantime, what are they?
Measuring time.
Yeah, what are they measuring?
Time.
Time. And they do that by checking the fathom. If I remember correctly, how they check the fathom is they have, with a rope, they have ropes that have like knots at certain intervals. And that's how you can tell how deep it is. And I can't remember exactly what the intervals are. But the fathoms, I think like 20 feet, whatever.
A fathom, 6 foot.
6 foot. So I guess,
Dimensions, yeah.
so you tie a knot every 6 feet and you lower it. And so that's how you know.
You tie a rock to the end of the line,
Right.
and
For-
then
for-
you drop it, and you do a sounding, what they call a sounding.
Okay. So that's how they measure depth, but by measuring the depth, it also measures the distance of how close or far they are from the shore. So as someone said, they're measuring time. And so 20 fathoms equals 144
1,000.
1,440 inches. The next measurement, 15 fathoms, equal 1,080 inches, which comes out to 2,520. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
And make that up.
Yeah, you can't make this up. And that's when they come into a shipwreck. Okay. So we know that the 273 numbers the Levites, that were on the boat. And I've read this many times. This Acts, and I've seen the number. I don't even know if I ever seen the number 273 while I was reading it, and because it was so. I mean, to me, it was so insignificant. It's like, okay,
I think it actually says 276.
right, 276. Right, it does say 276. Well, we get 273 from subtracting.
Yeah, Paul and
Yeah.
Luke and Aristarchus.
Right. Thank you for that correction. So as I was saying, many times I read that, but it's like, okay, so that's nice. Who cares? Why? And I thought nothing of it. And it's like, okay, not only is it significant in numbering the Levites so that the priests and the Levites after the shipwreck can go to the Nethinims, but it also is significant that number takes us to the wars, the Diodochi wars, the Pyrrhic wars, which opens up World War I, World War II, which opens up King of the North, King of the South, which opens up equality. And it's like, as Francisco says, you can't make this stuff up. Is God good or what?
Yeah.
Amen.
And thank God for Elder Tess, who, and I want to ask her. I want to ask her one day. Did you go to 273 AD? Did you look at anything else?
Yeah, she does mention that at some point in time that I think people asked her that question, and she said there was nothing significant there that she found.
Okay. All right. Because I think 273 is also absolute zero Celsius.
She also, I think, touched that too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I guess nothing there either. So then she kept searching, and 273 BC is like, there it is. So, yeah, God is good.
And so explain to us what 273 is. I'm turning it over to you.
273 is the Levites.
Yeah. But what was there? What did she find in 273 BC?
Oh, 273 BC?
Mhm.
That's the Battle of Ypsis.
I think that's where we're gonna.
Yeah, that's where we're heading next. So without further ado, thank you for the jumping in the discussions.
Yeah, you're welcome. But it wasn't actually Ypsis, because Ypsis was 2016, wasn't it? I think Ypsis was 2016. I was thinking more along the lines of it took her literally into a history in the book of Daniel that's not mentioned, that sits in between Alexander's death and the getting
Or on the four generals.
right.
Yes,
Yeah.
right. The 20, I think 22 years, I think.
Yeah, something like that. 20 or
Yeah,
something,
of the history that Daniel considered noise. For us, this is critical.
right.
Yes.
Thank you.
Also-
Thank you for that. It showed how much I need to review again too.
Yeah, this helps me a lot when I just keep talking and because when I just read somebody else, that's good. But when I talk and hear myself talk and hear you talk and others talk, it's more impressed in our minds, in my mind at least.
And in earlier, we were talking about the family of Agrippa's family. And I had looked it up, and the grandfather was Herod from Bethlehem.
Right.
And then the uncle was Antipas,
Yes, uncle was Antipas.
right, who killed John the Baptist. And then his father and Agrippa the first killed James the prophet. That's
Yes.
yeah. I just want to make sure I said it right.
Well, thank you for looking that up.
Yeah.
See, now because you looked it up, now it's more refreshed in our minds.
Mine's too.
So we're going to take the number 273 into a period of history. This is a history of Pyrrhus. You've probably heard of speak of this king. Again, we've gone into more detail in other studies late last year, but we will go through it fairly quickly so we can spend more time in these studies dealing with the lessons we learned from it. We're just going to cover the history of Pyrrhus. So at 323 BC is the death of Alexander the Great. So when we go to 273 BC, it's, whoops, why does it do that? It's closely related, it's closely connected with that history. We're going to consider the breakdown of Alexander's empire and the generals that arose in that history. We'll paraphrase a few quotes. This is from the writing of A.T. Jones of the Great Empires of the Bible History, page 220, paragraph 1. He says that the reputation of the Romans was now growing in 273 BC because they've just fought a 6-year war with Pyrrhus. So in 273 BC, A.T. Jones starts introducing the history of Rome. What he's saying in this history is that Rome begins to be noticed by foreign nations, in particular by Egypt. This is taking us to the history of the first rise of Rome. Before 273 BC, it worked in relative obscurity. People weren't taking much notice of the activity of Rome, at least within the Greek Empire, and the breakup of that empire. Egypt, Babylon, Seleucus, Ptolemy, all of those generals. No one was paying much attention to Rome. But there's a 6-year war between Pyrrhus and Rome, and because of that war, Egypt sends ambassadors to Rome. Egypt sends over ambassadors in 273 BC, right here. We'll paraphrase another quote in this book is called A Critical History of Early Rome. Prior to this history, there is a 6-year war between Pyrrhus and Rome, and it's known as a Pyrrhic War. There are three battles that all take you to the last and the final battle of 275 BC, the Battle of Beneventum. So it places Beneventum, the end of this war, in 275 BC. A couple of years later, in 273 BC, Egypt recognizes, what happened? Right, Egypt recognizes the rise of Rome. In 272 BC, A.T. Jones says the following year, Rome sends ambassadors to Egypt. In 275 BC, you see the end of the war, a 6-year war known as a Pirate War, and this was Pyrrhus fighting Rome.
So you see Rome coming on the scene
Mhm.
and raising in significance. In between, 275 is Panium, Beneventum is Panium.
Mhm.
So you see Rome being recognized in that history, the same history that you just showed as overturning Cilicia and Pamphylia.
Mhm.
To recap that history quickly, we'll use a map of Italy. Ignore the details. We just want us to see and make a point. Here is Rome in the north. And prior to this war with Pyrrhus, you would notice that they have control over the north. Battle by battle, they have taken control of the north of Italy. So just prior to this history, they have the north. And if they want to expand anywhere else, it's going to be into the south. But the south is populated differently than the north. It is composed of Greek city-states. You would think of states like you would consider Athens and Sparta. They're fairly independent, but they have a close family connection, and that is how the south is populated. There is one city-state, Tarentum, that has a sphere of influence over the rest of the city-states in the south. There is one other city-state, Thurii. It's on the other side of the Bay of Tarentum.
So as Rome begins to push south, it is aimed at this dominant city of Tarentum, and it ends with Tarentum and Rome going to war. Tarentum is not strong enough to defeat Rome alone, so they ask a relative of theirs down in a little country of Epirus, and Epirus is bordering Macedonia. They ask the king of this country, Pyrrhus, to come over to Tarentum and fight this war with Rome on their behalf. This king is known as Pyrrhus, and he agrees. And in 280 BC, he sails over to Tarentum, and then he fights against Rome. This is the Pyrrhic War.
Three battles, 280 BC, 279 BC, and 275 BC. This is the battles of Heraclea, 280 BC, Asculum, 279 BC, and Beneventum, 275 BC. 6-year Pyrrhic War. In 275 BC, Pyrrhus is defeated and Rome wins. What we need to see before we trace this history in greater detail is that this is a story of the king of the north and the king of the south. The king of the north is Rome. The king of the south is Pyrrhus.
So what this history is going to trace for us is this struggle between the king of the north and the king of the south that takes us to the Battle of Beneventum, where the king of the south is finally defeated. If we were to give that battle a name with which we are not more familiar with, we would call it Panium. 275 BC illustrates Panium. In the middle of this history, 273 BC, is the alliance between Egypt and Rome. Rome then returns that favor and sends ambassadors in 272 BC, and the chief ambassador is known as Fabius Maximus Georgius. And what does Maximus mean? Whoops, maximum, and Georges means flood. What comes as a flood? The papacy. When? At Sunday Law, at 272 BC. Rome comes against Egypt as a flood, not as any flood, but the maximum flood in 272 BC. So 273 BC takes us back into our same history between Panium and Sunday Law, and the story we will then trace. We want to understand who Pyrrhus is and his story, because if we understand Pyrrhus, then what we're going to understand is the king of the south in our time, in his history. We can already see those battles beginning to be illustrated.
We need to see is that this is all telling us the story of Pyrrhus as the king of the south. If we were to trace his history, it happens in two parts, an alpha and an omega. This is a story of Pyrrhus versus Rome, but it's the second part of his story. As a king, he comes into our history soon after the breakup of Alexander's empire. And it's in those early battles that we see his first history. If we trace his life, there's two parts. First, there are his campaigns in Macedonia, and then there are his campaigns in Italy.
So when we come to our history and we draw the line of Acts 27, where did we place the king of the south? In the second line, the ship of Alexandria. Where did we place the king of the south? Panium. We identified Panium. We could say midnight cry, Raphia, Panium. So there is a history here. And where else? Where else did we talk about the king of the south? We talked about the south wind. And what history is that? It's a 1989-1991 history. So we can see the king of the south without going into specifics of this, which we're going to do in another study. We just want to see that this is the history of the king of the south. It takes us to 1989 to 1991. Then we can mark a gap. Then we know that we're going to have a second history of the king of the south. There's an alpha and an omega. We see the same dynamic with Pyrrhus, Macedonia, and Italy. There is an alpha and an omega. So we're going to talk about the history of Pyrrhus, and we just don't want to go back to the Pyrrhic War with Rome. We need to go back to the first history of Macedonia and see where he began his work.
Daniel 8:5, and as I was considering, behold, a he-goat came from the west on the face of the whole earth, and touched not the ground. And the goat had a notable horn between his eyes. And he came to the ram that had two horns, which I had seen standing before the river, and ran unto him in a fury of his power. And I saw him come close unto the ram, and he was moved with choler against him, and smote the ram, and brake his two horns. And there was no power in the ram to stand before him. But he cast him down to the ground, and stamped upon him. And there was none that could deliver the ram out of his hand. Therefore the he-goat waxed very great. And when he was strong, the great horn was broken, and for it came up four notable ones toward the four winds of heaven. What history is this? We're talking about the he-goat. The he-goat has a notable horn. What is that horn? Alexander the Great. It's interesting that it doesn't give another history for Greece. It's just interested in that one horn, Alexander the Great. When that horn is broken, it transitioned to another kingdom. But this is giving the history of Alexander the Great and his death. He died in 323 BC. Then what does the verse say happened? You have one horn, and then what happens? It's broken. And then you have four horns. What are their names? Seleucus, Ptolemy, Cassander, and Lysimachus. One horn is broken, four arise.
When we go into that history, historically, is that simple? Is it that simple? How many generals take over Alexander's empire after his death? Many. We haven't counted, but there are many, at least a couple dozen. His empire is divided into many parts. These four, the Seleucus, Ptolemy, Cassander, and Lysimachus, aren't even the most powerful. When Alexander the Great died, Cassander was given nothing. He was only a boy. Seleucus had nothing. Ptolemy took Egypt. I think Lysimachus took something, but there were other generals, Perdiccas, Antipater, particularly another known as Antigonus. There were powerful generals who took over Alexander the Great's empire. A few are the most powerful, and the others who carved out little territories. It took 22 years from the death of Alexander in 323 BC to the rising up of these four generals, Seleucus, Ptolemy, Cassander, and Lysimachus, in 301 BC. So this is the 22-year history between the horn being broken and the four horns rising up. 22 years that Daniel skips. In that 22 years, there are four wars known as the Diodochi. The Diodochi wars that divide up that empire. They fight it over until it's just four left: Seleucus, Ptolemy, Cassander, and Lysimachus.
If we were to draw that on our reform line, we would say 323 BC, the death of Alexander. And then we mark four wars. And at the end of the fourth, in 301 BC, there is a famous battle. And it's our four generals in alliance against the last and fifth general. In 301 BC, there is a battle of Ypsis. And these four generals face the fifth. These four combined are only equal to him in strength. That is how powerful this fifth general is, Antigonus. In this fifth battle in 301 BC, Antigonus is killed, and we have our four generals marked. We only have those four generals for about 3 years. About 298 BC, Cassander dies. So 3 years later, you only have three. There were five generals: Seleucus, Ptolemy, Cassander, Lysimachus, and Antigonus. Five generals for a large part of this history, about 15 years. We skipped 22 years, 15 years of five generals to pick up these four generals in 301 BC. In 298, Cassander dies.
So if you were to take Daniel, this history, from the historian point of view, it's not naming what we might say is the significant parts of the history. What Daniel has done under inspiration is go through the history of Greece and take just the parts he wants to take to make the prophetic point he wants to make. He goes from the death of Alexander at 323 BC, skips everything else, and he says that's noise. It's unimportant. We need to block it and just go from 323 BC to 301 BC and mark the four generals. These are the four famous in prophecy. Pyrrhus comes into this history in this fourth war just before the waymark of 301 BC. Pyrrhus is still young. He begins his political campaign. He's made king and begins to work to create alliances to go into battle. He's about 16 or 17 years old, and he's going into battle. The first of his battles marked in history is Ypsis, where he first campaigns. So we want to consider that history, the beginning of Pyrrhus.
This fourth Diodochi war, actually the third and the fourth, is this dynamic. These four generals against Antigonus. So for the first and second Diodochi wars, you have the many generals fighting it out. And the third and the fourth have the same characteristics, 4 against 1. Seleucus, Ptolemy, Cassander, Lysimachus against Antigonus. The 5th, they fought in the Third Diodochi War, and neither side can completely wipe out the other.
The Fourth Diodochi War begins in 307 BC. We're talking about Antigonus, but there is another player that is important to mark. Antigonus isn't alone. He has a son, and that son plays a significant role in the Third and Fourth War, particularly in the Fourth. That son is Demetrius. To discuss his history, we need to consider both, because Demetrius becomes our main subject. Antigonus and his son, Demetrius. In 307 BC, Demetrius does something that is antagonistic against the 4 generals. He goes into Athens, defeats a dictator, and frees Athens. Demetrius frees Athens. That dictator was placed there as a puppet of Cassander 10 years previously in 317 BC. So that's got the 10-year proxy war that's marked there.
So in 317 BC, Cassander placed a puppet government in Athens designed to serve his interest. 10 years later, Demetrius frees Athens. This is a history of a proxy war. Athens is being used as a go-between. Because of this, war begins again, or the Fourth Diodochi War between 4 generals and Antigonus. The Fourth War begins, 307 BC. In 303 BC, an alliance is created. This is an alliance between Demetrius and Pyrrhus. This is where Pyrrhus enters the scene. Pyrrhus, the king of the south, goes into an alliance with Demetrius. Demetrius is a son of Antigonus. They are the 5th player in that history.
So in 303 BC, Pyrrhus' sister marries Demetrius, and Pyrrhus begins to act as a general for Demetrius. He fights as his general in just one battle, and this is the battle that we have been discussing, which is Battle of Ypsis in 301 BC. In the Battle of Ypsis, our 4 generals are in an alliance, and they're coming against Antigonus and Demetrius. Just prior to this battle, Ptolemy receives a fake report that it has already been fought and our allied generals have been defeated. Because of this, Ptolemy flees back to Egypt and does not take part in this battle. So when we come to the Battle of Ypsis, there are 3 allies, Seleucus, Cassander, and Lysimachus. And they go out to fight Antigonus and his son Demetrius. Demetrius has an important general, King Pyrrhus. So our 3 allies against Antigonus and Demetrius is supported by Pyrrhus, who's fighting for him in this battle.
Antigonus is defeated and killed. Seleucus comes to this battle. He's returning from his eastern campaign. If you have read into the history of Seleucus, he went into the east. He was extremely successful. And because he went into an alliance with an eastern king, he returns at the Battle of Ypsis with 400 to 500 war elephants. We don't know the exact number, but it was immense. It is these war elephants that decide the course of this battle. These 3, Seleucus, Cassander, Lysimachus, draw out against Antigonus and Demetrius. And what Seleucus is able to do is drive his elephants between them. Antigonus is isolated and killed. Demetrius becomes king of that empire. Most of it is lost to these 3, Seleucus, Cassander, Lysimachus, but he has his own navy and land. He, Demetrius, flees but begins to rebuild.
We'll close with a quick review. We've gone from Acts 27 into the history of Pyrrhus. We went there by going to 273 BC. We saw that 273 BC is a history between the Battle of Panium and Sunday Law. The king of the south in that history is Pyrrhus. He has 2 histories connected with him. two separate campaigns, one in Macedonia and one in Italy. Without proving it, which we can do in detail in different ways, the king of the south in our history comes in two separate histories, a beginning and an end, an alpha and an omega. So when we consider Pyrrhus, we need not just go back to his campaign in Italy, but consider his campaign in Macedonia. What we are going to do next time is draw out both histories. So we want to understand Macedonia and Italy, and an alpha and an omega, king of the south. And then we want to bring them into our history. Consider the king of the south in our time as an alpha and omega. They all illustrate what is happening now and in the very near future. Okay.
And that was the end of the presentation. 3 out of 15. Any questions, discussions?
No, that was excellent. I really enjoyed that. Thank you.
Yeah, it was a good study.
Good
Really
review.
good review.
I'm glad you went through those things and had us answer those questions because it made us our mind think. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's how I learn best. Just keep talking, discussing, and playing it in my own mind. So thank you for participating. So the question that I have is that in this the last section, the Diodochi Wars, we saw that Egypt sent a representative to Rome, right? And Rome sent back
Maximus Georgius.
Maximus Georgius, Fabius Maximus Georgius, which is maximum flood. So I suppose we can see the king of the north over the king of the south. And we have another instance where Rome defeats Pyrrhus. Again, another instance of king of the north defeating the king of the south. And any thoughts about that?
From what I remember, the ambassadors being sent back and forth, it was that Rome was like this little insignificant place, unknown on the world stage, whereas Egypt was, known on the world stage. So the notoriety that they got is what brought them to, for Egypt to send ambassadors to Rome. So Rome is getting recognized kind of on a world stage. You know what I mean? And then they go, I don't think that's the answer to the question that you were looking at, but I just wanted to make that point that, so then Rome sends ambassadors to Egypt. So now Rome is this big power. Because they rise up kind of out of obscurity. Is that the word I think that's used?
Yes.
But your question was you got two different scenarios of the king of the north over the king of the south is what you said, right?
Yes. So I was wondering if anybody had thoughts about that. And my thought was, okay, so Panium, the king of the south, starts to die, right? Which is soon. Starts losing sphere of influence. And we know that, I was reviewing this morning the counterfeit. And in one of the messages, the counterfeit was to dedicate Russia.
Right.
So, which means, again, king of the north over king of the south. So that was just what was going through my mind. And if anybody had other thoughts to it.
I have a few thoughts, but I'm afraid to say them yet. It goes along with the lines of what you just said. What we do know is that Russia is the king of the south, receives a deadly wound at Panium and death at Sunday Law, right?
Yes.
And that's where I'm kind of, there are things that I'd rather see developed by Elder Tessenel or Parmenter when it comes to how the French Revolution comes and fits in there. Because the French Revolution was, France was the king of the South. And yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of on two different lines of thought, I think, because Russia dies at the Sunday Law as a power, as a superpower, loses its spheres of influence. But you're going to have this division in the way you do have already this division in the United States, right? Your conservatives and your liberals. And I don't know that this is the right thing. I'm just thinking about the things that transpire is the liberals are, well, what's been said about the liberals in this dispensation as we were closing up the last dispensation, and from the studies that we've been reviewing in Uganda, what was the argument that her friend had about the liberals and the conservatives?
Well, I think there are a few issues brought up. What we can learn from them.
That's one, yeah.
Yeah, that's one.
That we can learn from them.
Why force them to be baptized?
Yes, that's one.
That's another one. Why force them to obey the rules, our laws, Sabbath?
Right.
And yeah, the reform.
The vows, the reform vows.
Uh-huh.
What did she say about Pope Francis?
Be more specific.
What was that?
Could you be more specific?
I'm talking about her friend. What was her friend? Well, I don't know if it was her friend that said this or just the mindset of those that are believing these things that come to, what do they say about Francis when it comes to equality?
Probably that he knows more than us.
How he understands equality, and he can probably be enough of them then.
Yeah.
So I was just thinking the thoughts through after with what you said about the King of the South and what that all means. I don't know what it all means, but the Nethinims are in the liberals, but not all the liberals are Nethinims. But you have the counterfeit equality, right?
Yeah.
So who winds up siding with the papacy?
Well, SDA does, don't they?
The liberal Protestants?
That's what it seems like. Yeah, I don't know how it's all gonna play out, but a lot of thoughts. A lot of thoughts.
Yeah, there's a lot to think about because he's liberal, or seems to be liberal anyways.
His words are, his actions
Right,
are
his
not.
words are
Yeah.
liberal.
False liberalism.
Right. But on the other hand, what we read, I don't know, it's one of those, we read so many documents. It's remember to get the vote. I'm not sure, I can't remember exactly what the vote was for.
You're
But
kind
to
of
get the
thinking,
vote, the conservative Protestant was going to have to reach out to a liberal pope.
Huh.
So, we just have to be
Oh,
prayerful.
you're cutting out.
you're fading away.
You moved away.
Yeah, no, I was just saying from the document that we read, it's the conservative Protestants that are going to have to reach out to a liberal pope.
Yeah.
So it's just very interesting. We have to be very prayerful we have to be very prayerful and wise.
Yes. Especially since I think about, with Panium, we're, I think she said it, maybe somebody heard it more specifically, but that like we're entering into Panium. We know that a waymark is a point in a period. It'll cover a period of time, and there will be an event or something that happens that's a cause, and then you'll have the effect. The effect will be the deadly wound on Russia. So, and then you also have the United States, the King of the North, with a victory. I feel troubled that we should be able to know these events at this point in time, and maybe we're not supposed to, but you know what I mean, to see it a little bit more clearly.
Yes. Now, I don't know if we're not seeing it clearly because we're not supposed to,
Right.
or I don't know if we're not seeing it clearly because
Right.
we're not looking at the right place. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
What?
Here we are in November. Right.
Victory hasn't happened yet, though, right?
The what?
The victory hasn't happened yet, so we can't really know exactly what it is, right?
Well, I was just thinking when she went through the review of the different waymarks and she showed each one of them, broke them down to a cause and effect. And, in the few months time or however much they were, I'm looking at the fact that we're at November 17th and Panium is 2021. That, yeah, I don't know if we're not meant to or flat out I'm not capable. I don't, you know what I mean? I do think about those things. We're supposed to be catching up to where we understand things, you know what I mean? And that one's kind of bothered me is maybe I'm wondering if we're supposed to see it. Or maybe we get it from Elder Tess, I don't know. I just want to be right with the Lord and endure till the end, I'll tell you that.
Amen.
But yeah, I mean, looking at where we're at in the month, in the year, waymark is a point in a period, and those things that are going on in there. I know that I didn't read the details on Belarus. Is that how you say it? Belarus?
Belarus.
Belarus? In Belarus? Is there something else that's not Belarus? Or maybe I am saying that wrong. I thought there was two different places.
Well, the two refugee places that are happening is Iran and Belarus.
Okay.
And they're both allies of Russia.
Reluctant allies. Russia just tolerates Belarus, but see, Lukashenko is considered the last dictator of Europe. He really is a dictator. I mean, he's in many ways he's crazy. He's kind of a loose cannon. He's crazier than Putin in many ways. But because of the sanctions that was put upon Belarus, he's kind of retaliating You know, he's like a little child throwing a tantrum, you know.
Mhm.
And so he's caused all these, or he's pushed all these immigrants that are from Syria and some of the Middle Eastern countries who are just destitute, and, you know, they're just trying to find safety amidst chaos. And he's using them and pushing them on Poland because Belarus is not part of the European nations. And so the sanctions are really hurting Belarus, but at the same time, Belarus has, I think they have gas or oil, I think it is. It's just crazy. And he's even in some instances, he's gone against Putin and, you know, and threatened Putin that if Putin didn't do things, he would cut off the pipeline that's going through Belarus. You know, I mean, he's just really kind of crazy, but it's really, you know, the thing that I look at is these people that are being put in these situations. It is freezing cold there. They have their clothing they're not equipped to be in the middle of this proxy war, and these people are being used as pawns. And that is the heartfelt, just horrible thing, is how these people are being used. It's horrible. And it's wrong. I'm glad that the European nations and the world is really putting the pressure on him, but yet again, he's a narcissist, he's a dictator, he's just like Donald Trump in many ways, only on steroids. I mean, he's what Donald Trump could become, you know, if he had been in control and let Ben another presidential term, he would have become just like Lukashenko, you know. So it's just very, you know, the thing that hurts is the people. The people are suffering, the poor, the destitute, the pawns that are being used as ping pong balls, basically, back and forth. It's just horrible. And I do have another comment about the King of the South, you know, with Putin and, you know, how, yes, the King of the South will lose its power at Sunday law, and America will lose its influence of equality and what it was supposed to have been, and will become more of a dictator. But at the same time, in a sense, the King of the South had a really big blow to the King of the North, because it succeeded in its influencing the people against the American people to be divided within its own nation, because that was the main desire for the King of the South, to influence the King of the North. Even though it will lose its influence, in many ways, its influence did help for the demise of the King in the North to lose its influence. You know what I'm saying? America has really lost its influence of equality in the world, and being a voice of reason and liberty and justice. And so in a sense, the King of the South did win. And I mean, when you look at it that way, because that's what they wanted. So it's kind of like, it's a bitter, you know, it's even though Russia will lose its power, in a sense, they won by how they have influenced, you know, with just the conspiracy theories, because they were like some of the major conspiratorial things that started a lot of this thing. And now you look at America's totally divided. That's never going to change. It's only going to get worse. And that's what they wanted. That's what Putin wanted. That's what Russia wanted, to break up this great nation that was for liberty and justice for all.
When
So,
you look back at 1989, when 1989 happened, it was the work of the United States on the inside, getting messages on the inside to get the people to turn against their government. That's a short summary of it. But was it Voice of America and one other free?
yeah.
Christina remembers what they were called, but
Mhm.
but putting messages in there, that caused the people to rise up, and that's what Russia has done to the United States, caused conflict between the North and the South, or the conservative and liberal.
Yeah, we got to remember that Vladimir Putin was a KGB.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the main things they did, was conspiracy theories and things like that. They were masters at that.
Yeah. Hmm. Well, are we gaining understanding in the King of the South? The manner of the King of the South as we continue to go through this?
I know I am, because I'd gone over that whole thing, this study that I did. And
Yeah.
I went over that study, and I looked at my notes, and my notes were all correct. The written notes,
Mm-hmm.
they all said church and state. But the visual that I put up there really was a powerful statement. And I always knew this. Visuals are really huge. It's like, just because I had that line, ask me why I put that line, I have no idea. Because when I look back and saw my notes all said,
Yeah.
church and state. I wrote it the right way, but when I looked at it, the picture of that church on top, state on bottom, and then a line, or state, I think it was state on top, church on bottom, line with the King of the North. That just, it's, a visual is in many ways more powerful than words. And I remember when I looked at the video, the first time, that first one where it had that symbol of the church of the state over church, I think it was. And it was in the top left. I actually said church and state. I didn't say church over state. So I actually read it right.
Mm-hmm.
But that visual just totally threw me off, and everybody off. So, and I thought to myself, wow, visuals are really powerful. And, I thought, God, where is it that you can see visuals that really can be very deceptive and can throw people off? And I thought, when you watch the news, because that's the only time I watch TV, and I noticed when I watch the news, the commercials are all pharmaceutical drugs. And you know how, like, when they're talking about the pharmaceutical drugs, and they're saying about whatever drugs they're pushing, there were always these beautiful pictures of people just having just the most wonderful life, and they're just enjoying themselves, and they're just so happy. And yet in the middle of that commercial, it talks about the warnings of these
side effects. Yeah.
And it's like, okay, yeah, it can cause, severe internal bleeding. Possible side effects could be cancer and even leading to death. And at the same time as they're speaking these warnings, which I think they have to, they're putting up these beautiful, like, wonderful times of people just having just a fantastic time. And people can almost discount that, the words. And I thought, wow, that is just powerful. How a visual is so important to get it right, because the deception, or of course I had no, I didn't mean to, I wasn't deceiving anybody. I truly did make a big mistake, but I realized at that point that visuals are really powerful, and people are, more impacted than it, because words, like I said, The first one, I actually said church and state, but yet the visual didn't say that. It said church over state. And that just changed the whole picture, you know? And so there was a lot of, like Elaine said, I continue to learn about what happened that last study. And at the same time, you know, I'm like, I watched that Brazil study, you know, all the videos, I watched them all, and I'm like so eager. I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't wait to do this stuff. And I'm like, no, wait a minute. I have to think, I have to take some time. I have to watch the other videos and learn a little bit more. And so I have to like not be so eager and don't want to just kind of run with it, you know. I have to, because it's exciting when you take on it. It's exciting to do a study. It's you kind of feel like when you're not doing one, something's like your life, something's missing, you know. But at the same time, I know that you know, we all need to take some time to, you know, catch up on things that we might have not had the time to. That's really important. And so I'm just kind of holding back the reins and doing what I got to do. But at the same time, I did watch the Brazil studies, and that was just fantastic. I love the way Parminder taught. He did just such an excellent, I could understand everything perfectly. And I also want to say, for the record, I don't believe that was, in my opinion, it was not, my mistakes on Sabbath was not anything to do with Elder Tess at all. It was all me. I got the words right, but that did me no good by getting the words right and getting the visual wrong. So that was me, you know.
But the thing that I'm always concerned about is just that the reason for doing the review is that we really understand it. Because I know from my own self that, you know, we watch them, and it's like things don't click. There's pieces that don't click. And it was, you know, my wanting us to do the review was to get those things stirred in our minds, to get them to click. And
Right.
the biggest clicks I get sometimes are when I've messed up, you know?
Yeah, you're right. You know what? You're absolutely right. Because you know what? I'll never forget that.
It's just,
Never. And then, okay, I also want to explain the second time that issue came up. Remember when it was the graph that had all the, you know, the true and the counterfeit, and on the bottom had the little church and state, and it was messing us up with the equals, or state and church and equals King of the North. By that point, I was saying church over state. And yet when I look at my notes, it was church and state. You see?
yeah, so it even fooled you.
Yes, it started to fool me.
Yeah.
And at the same time, when I wrote my notes, usually when I do church and state, when I do my notes, I put church / state, right? And so that just means church and state. And it's clear to me. But this time I was thinking, you know, I'm going to make it clear, because that doesn't, I'm going to write church and, like the word and, state. Well, I realized that wasn't as clear to me, because that wasn't a good visual for me. When sometimes you're just reading and you're kind of just glancing over what you're reading, that wasn't good for me. So from now on, when I do church and state, it's going to be church / state, because this church and the word state didn't work for me, because I didn't even notice it.
It makes things stick, you know. To
Yeah.
me, it makes things more stick. It's like
Yeah.
when that connection happens, however that connection happens, it makes it stick better. And that's
Yes.
why all this repetition and repeating it all is so good for us, because
Yes.
well, and just reviewing these Guadalupe ones, I mean, how many times have we gone through those and I felt like I could answer next to nothing when Phil was asking the questions, and it's like all these little details I couldn't remember.
Yeah, you know, because we're learning so much.
Yeah.
We do have to review, because, you know, you go a couple months and you don't review it, and you know, already you just, even some of the presentations that I've done.
Yeah, me too.
I mean, I can go back to the ones that I did. I got to be refreshed on the very presentations that I did myself with my own hands. You know, so we really do have to be on ball. But I did enjoy
Who did those Guadalupe ones?
the one that the Brazil one that you suggested with the Sophia.
Yeah, I've been reviewing those. They're extremely helpful.
That is just, I mean, it makes me understand so much more the mindset of the people.
Yes.
And our mindset, because, we used to think that, goddess of reason, just not good, but totally wrong.
Depends on the story.
Yep, it has a totally different, we're looking at it wrong. And so with knowing what he just taught in that series, now you're seeing it as Christ, as a figure of Christ, and it's like, wow, they had it. And, the people in France, they had it. They knew, they had the right mind when they did this, this thing. So it's just really just amazing learning. I just think to myself, wow, how did he get that?
But think about it when it comes to what the Protestants are doing today and what they're going to do when at Sunday Law is they're going to cause to rile up the same scenario.
Yeah.
And people being fed up with their Bibles because how they have been using their Bibles. They're using their Bibles to condone slavery and sexism and homophobia.
Yep.
And so all these oppressive laws are going to come into play that are going to force people to choose between God or man, and the people are going to be not the movement, but the people are going to be fed up with religion because that's what they've been taught God is.
So are you saying like the liberal people?
That's what I would think.
And those aren't the liberal Methanims, right? No, those are just liberals.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, we know the Methanims joined this movement. When we look at the French Revolution, and I don't understand it all either, but I'm just, I really listen to the things like they're saying something without saying it, and I listen to it. I know they're making a point, they're emphasizing on something, so I kind of try to zoom in on those things when they do that. And the French Revolution and the fact that it was the premier king of the North that puts the papacy on the throne. Then go fast forward to the French Revolution and how it's it was the poorer classes, wasn't it, that rose up like that against, it was because there was a big class warfare too, right, between the rich and the poor, a big gap, and everything that was being done in the name of God. And but he talks about, this is another point that he makes, and maybe you remember hearing this, another point that he makes, because it's the birth of a new, I think he says a new nation, a birth of a new nation. Does that sound familiar?
Yeah.
So that's what the French Revolution does. But, when I'm trying to think parable wise and think, what does that look like now?
Yeah.
And what's the new nation that's going to come out of that? Okay, if you look at the results of the French Revolution, it's going to be repeated. And it was the birth of a new nation. What is the birth of the new nation that comes out of all of that?
I don't know.
I have my thoughts, but I'll give you myself right now.
Yeah.
Because it's the end, remember?
Because he says that the people who did burn the Bibles and everything, I mean, of course, not the Bibles, that we don't want to be burning Bibles or anything. That wasn't the right thing. But he said that they had the right mind. I mean, they were, what they did was right. They did have, and by having that right mind is having the mind of Christ. But yet, of course, not burning the Bible and all that. But what they did was right to do, because it was despicable. And that's when they started these new laws, and that was a good thing,
something
Because-
else that he emphasizes too, and I can't remember if it was in those ones or not. It might have been, but where he was clarifying to people that when he's speaking and talking in parables.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So in saying that what they did was right, yeah, they practiced reason. It
Yep.
wasn't necessarily right throughout the Bible, but them and what they understood, what they were fed. And so you come to our history, and it's what the Protestants have been fed,
Uh-huh.
that they'll be fed up with when they see the results of what they've been fed. And what they've been fed brings the people to feel that they can persecute and even kill.
Right. Because I'm thinking that some of those people that will go against, the Protestants, the liberals, they could be some people that come into our movement,
Yeah,
They might not be all, atheistic people that hate, because, they could actually be, they might not.
well,
some people might just be
they were
some-
using reason.
Yeah, because, I get disgusted listening to the Protestants, but I don't hate God. But I get it makes me sick just listening to some of these Protestants. I just get like, ugh, I just don't even want to listen to them, but I still love God. So I have to think there's people out there that are liberal that just can't stand the unreasonable ridiculousness of these. They're getting so ridiculous. I think even worse than the French Revolution time. Just despicable. I just got to think there's some of them is going to be Levites and not Levite, Nephilims, and they're going to come into our movement because of that.
Well, they're going to be using reason.
Yeah, and we use, honestly, that's what we use.
Right,
We're looking at the inequalities. We're using reason.
right.
That's what
'Cause
we.
when you look at slavery and
Yeah,
sexism and homophobia,
that's
and
what we
you
do.
want to look at it and say, because that's where the laws are going to be against gender and LGBT, LGBTQ, to restrict them, and rights for women. All of it will be restricted, and so he compares also the Civil War. If you caught that too, he compares the Civil War, that they did the same thing in the Civil War. The North used reason.
Yeah, because with slavery, yes. It's-
Yeah, and so because the South had the "Thus saith the Lord,"
Yeah.
and so I think it was those ones that was helping me. I want to go back to understand how to be able to discuss gender and God. But going back, yeah, it was those ones, going back to that when he goes through Proverbs, because we were already talking about that before that to some extent in Proverbs. I've always seen that wisdom was a woman, female.
Yeah, wisdom is a
There
woman.
had to be a reason that wisdom was a female. It's like, who is it? It was a female, clearly. And
Right.
and it depicts God in both.
Yep. And he says that Christ came in like a female type, right? How did he say that about Jesus?
He came as a male. He said he had to come as a male, I think.
But he emulated femininity. I forget how he said it. I got to go listen to that again.
He said that wisdom, or Sophia is wisdom, and wisdom is
It's
the
female.
logos, the word, and the word
Right.
became flesh.
Yes.
And so he said Jesus is a female.
Yes, that's exactly what he said. And I was like, wow, that's so heavy. After I watched the last one, I was like, oh, is this it? It's kind of like I needed more,
Yeah.
hear more of the story.
Gives us time to digest in between,
Yeah.
because there was times where we didn't have digestion time.
Yeah.
So, well, anyways, really good discussion.
Thank you, Fel. That was, and Logina, thank you so much. That was great, really great. And really appreciated your your breaking down and your commentary, and it really shows that you've been studying this, and it's really, really encouraging, really, really inspiring too.
Well, praise the Lord, because, this is how we're going to edify one another
Yes,
to continue on, because time is short.
absolutely. I agree.
We're in a roller coaster, and, I'm enjoying the ride.
Yep.
God is at the helm, and we're going to do this. We got to do this.
That's right.
There's no other option.
That's
Yep.
right. That's right.
Absolutely.
Hey, hang on one second.
Thanks for the pop quiz.